My name is Joshua, but everyone calls me Grandpa Joe. I'm 61 years old, and I've just been discharged from the hospital after a terrifying heart scare. I was expecting comfort, warmth, my lovely wife waiting at the door, maybe even a worried smile, but everything changed. I'm going to tell you what my wife did to me, how I loved her completely, blindly, with everything I had. I sacrificed friendships, time, even part of myself just to see her happy. Everything I did for her, everyone turned their backs on me. But before I begin, please let me know in the comments, where are you watching this from? To everyone here supporting this community, thank you. Your messages keep me going. And if this is your first time here, do me a favor, like, subscribe, and hit the bell. You're not just joining a channel, you're joining a family that believes no one should suffer in silence. Now, let me tell you my story. 3 days. That's how long I was in that hospital bed, staring at ceiling tiles and listening to machines beep out the rhythm of my broken heart. Literally broken. The doctors said I was lucky. A warning shot, they called it. My body's way of telling me to slow down, take care of myself. Sarah visited every day. She'd sit in that uncomfortable plastic chair, holding my hand, telling me about her day at the flower shop. Normal things. Safe things. She even brought me that awful hospital coffee I pretended to like because she remembered I always drank coffee when I was nervous. For 3 days, she was the wife I fell in love with 32 years ago. The discharge nurse wheeled me to the curb where Sarah's car should have been waiting. Instead, there was my neighbor, Mrs. Chen, looking uncomfortable in her Sunday dress on a Tuesday afternoon. "Joshua," she said, not meeting my eyes, "Sarah asked me to pick you up." I should have known then. Should have felt it in my chest. Not the heart attack kind of knowing, but the deeper kind. The kind that tells you when the foundation of your world has shifted while you weren't looking. The ride home was quiet. Mrs. Chen kept glancing at me in the rearview mirror like I was made of glass. When we pulled into my driveway, I noticed Sarah's car wasn't there. Her usual parking spot next to the mailbox was empty, just oil stains on the concrete marking where her Honda used to sit. "Thank you," I told Mrs. Chen, but she was already driving away before I even reached the front door. The key felt foreign in my hand. 32 years of walking through this door, and suddenly I was fumbling with the lock like a stranger. When it finally opened, the silence hit me like a physical force. No Sarah calling out, "Welcome home, honey." No smell of dinner cooking. No sound of the evening news playing in the background. Just nothing. I set my overnight bag down in the hallway and called out anyway. "Sarah, I'm home." My voice echoed back empty. The living room looked exactly the same. Our wedding photo on the mantel, her reading glasses on the coffee table. The throw pillow she always fluffed, but I always left crooked. Everything in its place, but something was wrong. It felt like walking through a museum of my own life. I found the note on the kitchen table, propped against the salt and pepper shakers we'd bought on our honeymoon in Maine. White paper, torn from the notepad we used for grocery lists. Her handwriting, the same careful cursive she'd used to sign birthday cards and anniversary letters for 3 decades. "Joshua, I can't do this anymore. I know the timing is terrible, but I can't pretend. I'm staying with my sister until I figure things out. Please don't call. I need space to think. Sarah." That was it. 32 years of marriage. 3 children. 5 grandchildren. Countless anniversaries, birthdays, holidays, ordinary Tuesday mornings drinking coffee together. All of it reduced to 4 sentences on grocery list paper. I read it 3 times, my heart doing that irregular dance the doctors had warned me about. Each word felt like swallowing glass. I can't pretend. Pretend what? That she loved me? That we were happy? That the life we'd built together mattered? I sat down at our kitchen table, the same table where we'd argued about money, planned family vacations, helped our kids with homework, shared thousands of meals. Now it felt massive, an ocean of wood grain separating me from a life that apparently had been a lie. The refrigerator hummed. The clock on the microwave blinked 6:47 p.m. Outside, I could hear Mrs. Peterson walking her dog, the same route they'd taken every evening for the past 5 years. Normal sounds from a normal world that somehow no longer included me. I looked around the kitchen, really looked at it for the first time in years. Sarah's coffee mug was in the dishwasher, the blue one with "World's Best Mom" that our youngest had given her for Mother's Day 15 years ago. Her favorite pen was still on the counter next to the crossword puzzle from Sunday's paper, half finished. She'd left in the middle of everything, in the middle of living our life together. Or maybe she'd been planning this for weeks. Maybe while I was lying in that hospital bed, worried about dying, she was at home packing bags and deciding which parts of our shared history were worth taking with her. The house felt too quiet, too big, too empty. I turned on the television just to hear human voices, but every channel seemed to be showing commercials for family vacations and retirement planning and couples insurance policies. The universe's idea of a joke, I guess. I made myself a peanut butter sandwich, the first meal in my own kitchen that my wife hadn't made in 32 years. It tasted like cardboard and regret. As I sat there eating my sad dinner, I kept expecting to hear her key in the door, kept expecting her to walk in and explain that this was all a misunderstanding, that she just needed a few hours to process her fear about almost losing me. But the door stayed closed, and the silence stretched on, and I began to understand that this wasn't about needing space or figuring things out. This was about Sarah finally telling me what she'd apparently been thinking for who knows how long, that our marriage, our life together, had been something she had to endure rather than cherish. And I had no idea why. I didn't sleep that first night. How could I? The bed felt wrong. Too big, too cold, too quiet. Sarah's pillow still smelled like her shampoo, that vanilla and coconut scent that used to comfort me when I'd wake up from work-stress nightmares. Now it just made my chest tight in a different way than the heart attack. By morning, I'd convinced myself this was temporary. A midlife crisis maybe, or delayed shock from my health scare. People don't just walk away from 3 decades of marriage over a note on the kitchen table. There had to be more to the story. That's when I started making lists. Not because I'm naturally organized. Sarah was the one who kept track of everything, but because I needed to understand what I was dealing with. I needed evidence that this wasn't as final as it felt. I started with what was missing from our bedroom. Her clothes were gone from the closet, but not all of them. She'd left behind the blue dress I'd complimented her on at our anniversary dinner last year, the Christmas sweater our daughter bought her, 3 pairs of shoes that she'd complained pinched her feet but never threw away. If she was really leaving for good, why leave clothes behind? In the bathroom, she'd taken her makeup and hair products but left her prescription reading glasses on the nightstand. Sarah couldn't function without those glasses. She wore them to read menus, medicine bottles, price tags at the grocery store. How do you start a new life when you can't read the fine print? But it was in the living room that I found what really confused me. Our photo albums were still there. All of them. Wedding pictures, baby pictures, family vacations, graduations, 32 years of shared memories sitting exactly where they'd always been on the bottom shelf of the bookcase. She'd taken her jewelry but left our history. She'd packed her clothes but abandoned our wedding album. I pulled out the album from our honeymoon in Maine. There we were, young and sunburned and laughing at something I couldn't remember. Sarah was wearing that yellow sundress she'd bought specifically for the trip, the one she said made her feel like a movie star. In every picture, she was looking at me the way people look at miracles. When did that stop? When did I stop being her miracle and start being something she needed to escape from? I called her sister Linda, the number I'd dialed 1,000 times over the years to arrange family gatherings and birthday surprises. Linda had always liked me, or at least I thought she did. She was Sarah's maid of honor, the one who'd joked during her wedding speech that she'd never seen her sister so happy. Joshua. Linda's voice was carefully neutral when she answered. Professional, like she was talking to a telemarketer. Linda, thank God. Is Sarah okay? I mean, I know she's upset, but she's safe. That's all you need to know right now. All I need to know. Linda, she's my wife. I just got out of the hospital and came home to a note. A note, Linda. After 32 years, I got a grocery list goodbye. Can you at least tell me what I did wrong?" The silence stretched so long I thought she'd hung up. "Joshua." Linda's voice got softer, sadder. "She said you'd ask that." "Ask what?" "What you did wrong. She said you'd want to fix this like it was a problem with the plumbing or the car. She said you'd make lists and try to solve it." I looked down at the notebook in my hand, at the inventory I'd been making of missing items and abandoned belongings. "That's not. I just want to understand." "She said you'd say that, too." This felt like talking in code. Like Linda and Sarah had scripted this conversation and I was the only one who hadn't seen the dialogue. "Linda, please. We've known each other for over 30 years. Whatever's going on, whatever I did or didn't do, we can work through it. People don't just throw away a marriage because..." "Because what, Joshua? Because you can't imagine what you might have done wrong? Because in your mind, you've been the perfect husband?" The sharpness in her voice caught me off guard. Linda had never spoken to me like this. Even during family arguments, holiday stress, the time I accidentally broke her grandmother's vase, Linda had always been gentle with me. I tried to be. I worked hard. I provided for her. I never cheated or drank or... "Joshua, stop." I stopped. "Those are the things you didn't do wrong. Sarah isn't leaving you because you're a bad man. She's leaving because being married to you has made her feel invisible." Invisible? The word hit me like another chest pain. "I don't understand." "I know you don't. That's the problem." "Then help me understand. Please, Linda. If I made her feel invisible, then I want to do better. I want to see her. I want..." "It's too late for wanting, Joshua. It's been too late for a long time." But she never said anything. If she was unhappy, why didn't she tell me? Another long pause. "She did tell you. Maybe not with words, but... Joshua, when's the last time you asked Sarah what she wanted? Not what she wanted for dinner or what movie she wanted to watch, but what she wanted from life." I opened my mouth to answer and realized I couldn't. Not recently. Not in years, maybe. "When's the last time you two had a conversation that wasn't about schedules or the kids or household maintenance?" Again, nothing. "When's the last time you looked at your wife, really looked at her, and saw a person with dreams and disappointments and hopes that had nothing to do with you?" The questions kept coming, and I kept failing them. Each one revealed another blind spot, another way I'd apparently been living with a stranger while thinking I knew everything about her. "She's not angry at you, Joshua. She's just done being nobody." After Linda hung up, I sat in my empty house surrounded by the things Sarah had chosen to leave behind. The wedding china we'd registered for, but rarely used. The anniversary jewelry I'd given her that she'd wear once and then carefully put away. The family photos where she was always slightly out of focus, always one step back from the center of the frame. I began to see a pattern in what she'd taken and what she'd left. She'd taken the practical things: clothes, toiletries, important documents. She'd left behind the sentimental things, the symbols of our shared life, the proof that we'd once been happy. It was like she was saying, "You can keep the memories. I need to go make new ones." But I still didn't understand why. 2 weeks passed in a fog of casseroles from concerned neighbors and phone calls I didn't answer. I'd mastered the art of looking busy whenever someone came to the door, grabbing a random tool from the garage, pretending to be in the middle of important yard work. The truth was, I spent most days sitting at the kitchen table staring at Sarah's note like it might reveal new information if I read it enough times. I'd called her cell phone exactly once. It went straight to voicemail, and her greeting had changed. Instead of, "Hi, you've reached Sarah and Joshua Patterson," it was just, "This is Sarah. Leave a message." Even her voicemail had divorced me. I was getting good at pretending to be okay. When our daughter Emma called from Seattle, I told her everything was fine, just a rough patch. When my son Michael stopped by to check on me, I made jokes about having the TV remote to myself. I'd become an actor in my own life, performing the role of a man who wasn't falling apart. The performance ended on a Thursday afternoon when my neighbor Mrs. Chen knocked on my door. "Joshua, I hope you don't mind, but I wanted to show you something." Mrs. Chen was in her 70s, a sweet woman who'd lived next door for 15 years. She'd been trying to cheer me up with homemade soup and concerned glances over the fence. I appreciated the kindness, even if I didn't want it. She was holding her iPad, the screen already glowing with something she wanted me to see. "My granddaughter taught me how to use Facebook," she said, settling into Sarah's usual spot on the couch. "I've been looking at pictures of her college life, and I was searching for people from the neighborhood to connect with, and—" She hesitated, her finger hovering over the screen. "Maybe I shouldn't show you this. Maybe it's better if you don't know yet." "Know what?" She turned the screen toward me, and my world tilted sideways. It was Sarah. My Sarah, but not my Sarah. She was wearing a white sundress I'd never seen, standing on what looked like a tropical beach. Her hair was different, lighter, styled in a way that made her look younger. She was smiling the kind of smile I hadn't seen on her face in years. Genuine joy, the kind that starts in your eyes and spreads to your whole body. But it wasn't just Sarah in the photo. Next to her, with his arm around her waist, was a man I recognized but couldn't immediately place. Tall, silver-haired, professionally tanned. He was looking at Sarah the way I used to look at her, the way she used to look at me in those honeymoon photos. "Do you know who that is?" Mrs. Chen asked gently. I stared at the man's face until it clicked. Richard Chen. No relation to my neighbor, despite the shared surname. He was the senior partner at the accounting firm where our son Michael worked. I'd met him at Michael's work Christmas party last year, and before that at a company barbecue. He'd seemed nice enough, successful, charming, recently divorced. The photo was tagged with a location, Bora Bora. The caption read, "Sometimes life surprises you with exactly what you need when you need it most. Grateful, you each new chapter, each paradise." Posted 3 days ago. I felt that familiar chest tightness, but this time it wasn't my heart trying to kill me. This was something else entirely. This was my marriage dying in real time on social media, documented in high resolution for anyone with an internet connection to see. "Joshua?" Mrs. Chen's voice seemed to come from very far away. "Are you all right?" I scrolled down to see the comments. Friends I'd known for decades were congratulating Sarah on her happiness. "You look radiant. About time you put yourself first. He's gorgeous. Where did you find him?" Each comment was a small knife, because they all seemed to understand something I didn't. How long had this been going on? How long had people been watching my marriage crumble while I remained completely oblivious? I kept scrolling, looking for clues, for some explanation that would make this make sense. There were more photos: Sarah and Richard at dinner, Sarah and Richard on a boat, Sarah and Richard walking hand in hand through what looked like a resort garden. In every single photo, Sarah looked alive in a way that made me realize she'd been dying slowly in our house for who knows how long. "When did she leave town?" I asked Mrs. Chen. "I saw her loading suitcases into a car the day after you came home from the hospital. I thought she was just going to stay with Linda for a few days." The day after, while I was sitting in our kitchen reading her note and making lists of missing items, she was on a plane to Paradise with another man. The timeline started forming in my head. She'd visited me in the hospital every day, holding my hand, bringing me coffee, acting like the devoted wife she'd been for 32 years. But the whole time, she already had one foot out the door. The whole time, Richard Chen was probably booking flights and making reservations and planning the perfect romantic getaway for a woman who was technically still married to me. "How long do you think?" I couldn't finish the question. Mrs. Chen closed the iPad and took my hand. "I don't know, Joshua, but from these pictures, it looks like they're very comfortable together." "Comfortable?" That was a kind way of saying they looked like they'd been doing this for a while. Like this wasn't a spontaneous escape but a carefully planned transition from one life to another. I thanked Mrs. Chen and walked her to the door, my legs moving on autopilot while my brain tried to process what I'd just seen. After she left, I sat back down at the kitchen table and tried to remember every interaction I'd ever had with Richard Chen. The Christmas party. He'd been charming, funny, attentive to all the wives. I'd thought he was just being professional, networking with the families of his employees. But had he been paying special attention to Sarah? Had she been paying special attention to him? The company barbecue the summer before. Richard had complimented Sarah on her potato salad, asked for the recipe. She'd blushed and laughed and seemed pleased by the attention. I'd been proud that my wife's cooking was being appreciated, never imagining that the appreciation might extend beyond potato salad. How many other moments had there been? How many conversations, text messages, coffee meetings disguised as innocent encounters? How long had Sarah been living a double life while I congratulated myself on having a stable, happy marriage? The worst part wasn't even the affair itself. The worst part was realizing that while Richard Chen was discovering Sarah, really seeing her, making her laugh, making her feel special, I'd been taking her for granted so completely that I never noticed she was disappearing. She hadn't left me for Richard Chen. She'd left me for the version of herself that Richard Chen helped her remember she could be. And now they were in paradise, posting pictures of their happiness for the whole world to see, while I sat alone in a house full of abandoned memories, finally understanding that I hadn't just lost my wife. I'd lost her so gradually, so completely, that by the time she walked away, there was nothing left to fight for. She was already gone. I just hadn't been paying enough attention to notice. His career, confident in most areas of his life, was looking at me like I was a piece of fine china that might shatter if he spoke too loudly. "Dad, you look like hell." "Thanks, that's exactly what every man wants to hear from his offspring." He set the food on the kitchen table, the same table where I'd been eating sad meals alone for 2.5 weeks. The smell of orange chicken and lo mein should have made me hungry, but my stomach had been in knots since the Facebook discovery. "We need to talk," Michael said, not meeting my eyes. "About what?" "Dad." He sat down across from me in the spot where Sarah used to sit. "I know about Mom and Richard." The words hung in the air like smoke. I'd been dreading this conversation, but hearing it confirmed by my own son somehow made it more real, more devastating. "How long have you known?" Michael picked at his food, moving the chicken around his plate without eating it. "A few months, maybe longer." "A few months?" My voice cracked. "And you didn't think to tell me?" "Tell you what, exactly?" "That I suspected my boss was interested in my mother. That Mom seemed happier when his name came up in conversation. That she started asking questions about him that had nothing to do with my job." Each revelation felt like another small death. Sarah had been asking about Richard Chen. She'd been thinking about him, talking about him, probably looking forward to seeing him at company events while I remained completely oblivious. "You could have warned me." "Warned you about what?" "Dad, if I had come to you 6 months ago and said, 'I think Mom might be developing feelings for someone else,' what would you have done?" I opened my mouth to answer and realized I had no idea. "You would have told me I was imagining things," Michael continued. "You would have said Mom was devoted to you, that your marriage was solid, that I was being ridiculous, because that's what you believed." He was right. 6 months ago, if someone had suggested Sarah was unhappy enough to leave me, I would have laughed at them. When did it become more than just feelings? Michael sighed, looking older than his 34 years. "I don't know exactly, but at the company Christmas party last year I watched them together. Really watched them. The way they talked to each other, the way she lit up when he paid attention to her. Dad, I hadn't seen Mom look that animated in years. She was animated at home. We talked every day." "About what?" The question stopped me cold. What did Sarah and I talk about? Schedules, grocery lists, the weather, whether we needed to call the plumber about the kitchen faucet, When was the last time we'd had a real conversation about anything meaningful? I started paying more attention after that, Michael said. At the company barbecue last summer, Richard made a point of sitting next to Mom. They talked the entire time about books they'd both read, places they wanted to travel, art exhibitions at the museum downtown. I realized I'd never heard you and Mom talk about any of those things. Your mother and I had different interests. Did you know she wanted to go to Italy? I blinked. What? Italy. She's been talking about it for years, apparently. The art, the history, the food. She bought Italian-language CDs and was teaching herself basic phrases. Richard mentioned that he'd been to Florence 3 times, and Mom's whole face changed. She looked like he'd just told her he'd been to heaven. I felt like Michael was describing a stranger. She never mentioned Italy to me. Dad. Michael's voice got softer, sadder. She mentioned it to me. Last Thanksgiving, she said she'd always dreamed of seeing the Sistine Chapel, but she figured it would never happen because you weren't interested in traveling anymore. We went to Florida 2 years ago to visit your sister for 4 days, and you complained about the flight the entire time. This conversation was revealing the depth of my ignorance in ways that made my chest hurt. Not the heart attack kind of hurt, the kind that comes from realizing you've been sleepwalking through your own marriage. Richard travels all the time for work, Michael continued. He has stories about every major city in Europe. He knows which restaurants have the best views, which museums are worth visiting, which hotels treat you like royalty. When he talked about these places, Mom would get this look, like she was imagining herself there. So she fell in love with his travel stories? She fell in love with possibility, Dad, with the idea of being with someone who saw the world as something to be explored instead of something to be endured. That stung. When had I become someone who endured life instead of exploring it? When had I stopped being curious about anything beyond my routine, my comfort zone, my predictable little world? I should have seen it coming, Michael said. By spring, she was asking me about Richard's divorce, whether he was dating anyone, what kind of person he was outside of work. She was asking as a friend, she said, but it was more than that. You could have told me then. And said what? Dad, I think Mom has a crush on my boss. You would have been humiliated. And honestly, I kept hoping it was just a phase, that she'd get it out of her system and things would go back to normal. When did you realize it wasn't a phase? Michael was quiet for a long moment, poking at his food like he was looking for answers in the lo mein noodles. About a month before your heart attack, Richard asked me to stay late to work on a presentation. When I finally left the office around 9, I saw Mom's car in the parking lot of that coffee shop on 5th Street, the one that stays open late. My stomach dropped. She was with him. I didn't go in to check. I didn't want to know for sure, but her car was there, Dad, at 9 o'clock on a Tuesday night when she was supposed to be at home watching her cooking shows. Maybe she was just... There's more. Michael looked miserable. The week you were in the hospital, Richard was different at work. Distracted, anxious, checking his phone constantly. He left early every day, said he had personal matters to attend to. I thought maybe he was dealing with something related to his divorce, but now you think he was planning their getaway. Michael nodded. While you were lying in that hospital bed, scared you might die, Richard was probably booking flights to Bora Bora. The betrayal felt complete now. Not just Sarah's betrayal, but the betrayal of timing. While I was facing my mortality, confronting the possibility that I might leave Sarah a widow, she was already planning her escape with another man. Did she ever say anything to you about being unhappy? Not directly, but Dad. She stopped talking about the future. Your future together. Used to be, she'd mentioned things you two were planning to do when you retired, places you'd visit, how you'd spend your golden years. That stopped months ago. I thought she was just focused on the present. She was focused on someone else's present. We sat in silence for a while, the Chinese food growing cold between us. Finally, Michael reached across the table and put his hand on mine. "I'm sorry, Dad. I'm sorry I didn't handle this better. I'm sorry I didn't find a way to warn you. I'm sorry Mom did this the way she did." "Are you sorry she did it at all?" Michael looked at me for a long time before answering. "Dad, I love you. You're my father, and you've always been good to our family. But I've watched Mom fade away over the past few years. She used to be vibrant, curious, excited about things. She had opinions and dreams and this laugh that could fill up a room. Somewhere along the way, she became smaller, quieter, like she was shrinking into herself. I never asked her to shrink. No, but you never asked her to grow either. When's the last time you encouraged her to try something new, to pursue a dream, to take a risk? When's the last time you looked at her and saw someone with her own wants and needs instead of just your wife who was there to make your life comfortable? The questions felt like accusations, but they were coming from my son, not a stranger. They were coming from someone who loved both of us and had been watching our marriage deteriorate from the inside. "Richard sees her as a whole person," Michael said quietly. "He's interested in her thoughts, her dreams, her opinions about things that have nothing to do with household management or family logistics. He makes her feel like she matters for who she is, not just for what she does for other people." "And I don't?" Michael's silence was answer enough. After he left, I sat alone with the cold Chinese food and the crushing realization that my son had been watching my marriage die in slow motion. That he'd seen Sarah's unhappiness more clearly than I had. That he'd known she was falling in love with someone else and hadn't known how to save either of us from what was coming. The worst part was that I couldn't even be angry with him. If I'd been a better husband, there wouldn't have been anything to warn me about. The notebook was nothing special, just a cheap spiral-bound thing I'd grabbed from the kitchen drawer, the kind Sarah used to use for grocery lists and phone messages. But sitting at that kitchen table at 2 a.m, unable to sleep for the 4th night running, it felt like the only thing in the house that might hold some answers. I didn't plan to start writing about Sarah. I thought maybe I'd make lists, things I needed to do now that I was alone, people I should call, repairs the house needed, practical stuff, the kind of problem-solving that had always made sense to me. Instead, I found myself writing about the way she used to hum while she cooked dinner. Not any particular song, just these soft, unconscious melodies that would drift through the house and let me know she was content. When did she stop humming? I couldn't remember. It had been so gradual that I'd never noticed the silence until it was already complete. 3 pages about humming led to 5 pages about the way she used to read in bed, propped up against her pillow with her reading glasses sliding down her nose. She'd turn pages so carefully, like each book was precious. Sometimes she'd share little bits of what she was reading. A funny passage, an interesting fact, a beautiful description of some place she'd never been. When did I stop listening to those little offerings? When did I start responding with, instead of, "Tell me more"? Night after night, I found myself at that table, filling page after page with memories I hadn't thought about in years. The early days when Sarah would surprise me with picnic lunches at my construction site. The way she'd dance alone in the living room when she thought I was in the shower, spinning around to songs only she could hear. How she used to leave little notes in my lunchbox. Not love letters, just small observations or jokes that would make me smile in the middle of a difficult day. When did she stop packing my lunch? When did I stop appreciating the little notes? The writing was supposed to help me understand what had gone wrong. Instead, it was showing me what had gone right for so many years, and how gradually, carelessly, I'd let it all slip away. I wrote about our early conversations, when Sarah would tell me about her dreams of becoming a teacher, maybe getting her master's degree someday, traveling to places she'd only seen in books. I'd encouraged her then, told her she could do anything she set her mind to. But then life got complicated. Kids, mortgage, my business struggling through the recession. Her dreams got set aside for more practical concerns, and somehow I'd never asked if she wanted to pick them up again. I wrote about the way she used to look at me across crowded rooms at parties, giving me that secret smile that said we shared something special. How she'd find excuses to touch my arm when she walked past my chair. The way she'd curl up next to me on the couch during movies, fitting against my side like she was made to be there. When did we stop sitting together? When did we start claiming opposite ends of the couch like strangers sharing a bus seat? The more I wrote, the more I realized I wasn't just chronicling the decline of my marriage. I was documenting my own disappearing act. Somewhere along the way, I'd stopped being Sarah's husband and started being her roommate. A polite, responsible roommate who paid the bills and mowed the lawn and showed up for dinner, but who had somehow forgotten that the woman across the table was a whole person with inner life and unfulfilled longings. I wrote about the birthday 3 years ago when I'd given her a new vacuum cleaner. She'd smiled and thanked me, but there had been something flat in her eyes. At the time, I thought it was a practical gift, something she'd use every week, something that would make her life easier. Now, I understood that what she'd seen in that vacuum cleaner was evidence that I thought of her primarily as the person who cleaned our house. What had she wanted instead? I'd never asked. I'd never even considered that she might want something that had nothing to do with household management. I wrote about our anniversary dinner last year, how proud I'd been of choosing the fancy restaurant downtown. But during dinner, she'd been quiet, distracted, responding to my conversation with polite interest rather than genuine engagement. I'd attributed it to being tired from work, never considering that she might be bored by my company. What had we talked about that night? I struggled to remember. Probably the kids, our retirement savings, whether we needed to replace the water heater. Safe topics, practical topics, topics that required no vulnerability, no curiosity about each other's interior lives. The pages kept filling up. Stories about how Sarah used to sing along with the radio in the car, badly and enthusiastically, until I'd made some comment about hitting the right notes. How she'd stopped singing after that. Stories about how she used to suggest spontaneous adventures, drives to the coast, visits to museums, tries at new restaurants, until I'd shot down enough suggestions that she stopped making them. I thought I was being reasonable, responsible, careful with our time and money. She'd probably thought I was being controlling and boring. I wrote about the way she'd tried to share her interests with me, the cooking show she'd wanted us to watch together, the book club she'd invited me to join, the art fair she'd asked me to attend. I'd declined them all, claiming I wasn't interested, never considering that my participation wasn't about my interests, it was about hers. Each memory was like turning over a stone and finding something ugly underneath. Not cruel or deliberately hurtful, just thoughtless. Death by 1,000 small dismissals. By the end of the first week of writing, I had 43 pages filled with the story of how a man could love his wife completely while making her feel completely unseen. It wasn't a story of dramatic betrayal or obvious neglect. It was the story of benign indifference masquerading as stable marriage. I called the notebook The Man Who Wasn't There because that's what I'd been, physically present but emotionally absent. Available for practical matters but unavailable for the kind of connection that makes a person feel truly known and valued. The writing became addictive. Each night I'd remember something else, another moment when I'd chosen comfort over curiosity, routine over romance, practical over passionate. Sarah hadn't left me for Richard Chen because he was better looking or more successful. She'd left me for someone who saw her as a fascinating individual rather than a reliable support system. I wrote about the last time we'd made love. Not just had sex, but made love with attention and tenderness and genuine desire for each other. I couldn't remember when that had been. Months. Years. Had we become so comfortable with each other that we'd forgotten to be attracted to each other? I wrote about conversations we'd stopped having, adventures we'd stopped taking, dreams we'd stopped sharing. Page after page of the slow, subtle ways a marriage could die while both people were still going through the motions of being married. The most painful realization was that Sarah had probably been trying to tell me all of this for years. Not directly, she wasn't confrontational by nature, but through small requests, gentle suggestions, wistful comments about things she'd like to do or see or experience. I'd heard her words as idle chatter rather than invitations to connect with her inner life. By the time I filled that first notebook and started a second one, I understood something that was almost worse than the affair itself. Sarah hadn't left me for Richard Chen. She'd left me for the version of herself that emerged when she was with someone who paid attention to her dreams instead of just her dinner preparations. She'd left me to save herself from disappearing completely, and I couldn't even blame her for it. I never intended for anyone else to read what I'd written. The notebooks were therapy, a way to make sense of how thoroughly I'd failed at something I'd thought I was good at. But my grandson, Tyler, had other plans. Tyler was 18, home from his first semester of college, staying with us for what was supposed to be Christmas break with both grandparents. Instead, he got to watch his grandfather eat cereal for dinner and muttered to himself while scribbling in notebooks like some kind of deranged academic. "Grandpa Joe, what are you writing?" he asked one evening, finding me at the kitchen table surrounded by 3 completed notebooks and working on a 4th. Nothing important, just trying to figure some things out. "Can I read it?" "No." The response was immediate, protective. These pages contained every humiliating realization about my marriage, every moment of self-awareness that came too late to matter. No one needed to see that level of personal failure documented in detail. But Tyler was persistent, in that way only 18-year-olds can be. Over the next few days, he kept circling back to the notebooks, asking questions, making comments about how writing was probably therapeutic, how sometimes sharing stories could help other people going through similar experiences. "It's not that kind of story," I told him. "It's not inspiring or helpful. It's just sad." Sometimes sad stories are the most important ones to tell. I should have paid more attention to the way his eyes lit up when he said that. 3 days after Christmas, Tyler came running into the house waving his phone like he'd won the lottery. "Grandpa Joe! Grandpa Joe, you have to see this." "What's wrong? Is someone hurt?" "Nothing's wrong. Everything's amazing. Look." He shoved his phone in my face, showing me a screen full of numbers and comments that made no sense to me. "Tyler, I can't read that tiny text. What am I looking at?" "You're famous." My blood pressure spiked. "I'm what?" "I posted your story online." "Well, part of it. The first notebook, where you talk about coming home from the hospital and finding the note and realizing all the ways you'd been absent without knowing it. I called it The Man Who Wasn't There, a true story of love and loss." I sat down hard in the nearest chair. "You did what?" "I posted it on my blog and then shared it on TikTok and Instagram and Reddit. And Grandpa Joe, people are going crazy for it. Look at these comments." He started reading from his phone. "This is my husband exactly. I'm crying because this could have been written about my dad. Finally, a man willing to admit he was the problem. This is the most honest thing I've ever read about marriage." "Tyler, you had no right. There's more. My ex-husband should read this and learn something. This man is braver than most for admitting his mistakes. I'm sharing this with every married couple I know." I felt like I was having another heart attack. My private shame, my personal failures, my most intimate realizations about my marriage were now public entertainment for strangers on the internet. "Take it down, right now." "Grandpa Joe, you can't take it down. It's been shared thousands of times already. Look." He scrolled through screens of numbers that kept growing. 17,000 likes on Instagram, 43,000 shares on Facebook. The TikTok video has been viewed over 100,000 times. TikTok video? I made a video of me reading parts of your story. It's really powerful when you hear it out loud. People are saying it should be required reading for married men. I put my head in my hands. Somewhere out there, Sarah was probably seeing this. Our son Michael was probably getting calls from co-workers who recognized the story. My private humiliation was becoming public spectacle. "I thought you'd be happy," Tyler said, his enthusiasm deflating. People are really connecting with what you wrote. They're saying it's brave and honest, and that it might save some marriages. It didn't save mine, but it might save theirs. Look at this comment. I just called my wife and asked her what she's been trying to tell me that I haven't been hearing. We talked for 2 hours. Thank you for opening my eyes. And this one. I'm going to show this to my husband tonight. Maybe if he sees it from another man's perspective, he'll understand. Despite my horror at the violation of privacy, I found myself curious about what people were saying. Tyler kept reading comments, and a pattern emerged. Women were sharing the story and saying, "This is exactly what I've been trying to explain to my husband." Men were reading it and having uncomfortable recognitions about their own marriages. "There's a reporter from the Washington Post who wants to interview you," Tyler said, and someone from Good Morning America left a message. "Oh, and there's a literary agent who thinks you should write a book." "A book? About marriage and middle age and learning to really see the person you're with? She says your voice is authentic and relatable, and that there's a huge market for honest writing about relationships." The phone started ringing. I ignored it, but Tyler checked the caller ID. "It's the Today Show." I unplugged the phone. Over the next week, the story continued to spread. Tyler showed me articles written about it, discussion threads analyzing it, marriage counselors using it as an example in their sessions. My private notebook had apparently struck a nerve in the collective American consciousness. The responses weren't all positive. Some people accused me of seeking attention, of exploiting my divorce for sympathy, of trying to make myself look good by appearing humble. Others said I was too little too late, that Sarah deserved better than a man who only learned to appreciate her after she left. But the majority of comments were from people who saw themselves in my story, wives who felt invisible in their marriages, husbands who recognized their own patterns of benign neglect, adult children who watched their parents' relationships slowly deteriorate through lack of genuine attention and curiosity. "You started a conversation," Tyler explained. "People are talking about emotional neglect in marriage, about the difference between being physically present and emotionally available. Marriage counselors are saying your story explains concepts they've been trying to help couples understand for years." I felt exposed, raw, like I was walking around without skin, but I also felt something I hadn't experienced in months: useful. My failure was helping other people recognize similar patterns in their own relationships before it was too late. The irony wasn't lost on me. By sharing the story of how I'd failed to really see Sarah, I'd finally gotten people to really see me. My writing had made me visible in a way I'd never been before, but visibility came with a price. Every day brought new interview requests, more comments to read, more strangers weighing in on the most private aspects of my life. Some wanted to comfort me, others to condemn me, still others to learn from my mistakes. And somewhere out there, Sarah was seeing all of it, watching her former husband become internet famous for publicly dissecting their marriage. I wondered what she thought about becoming part of a viral story, whether she felt violated or vindicated or something else entirely. I was about to find out. The email arrived on a Tuesday morning, 3 weeks after Tyler's post had turned my private shame into public conversation. I almost didn't see it. My inbox had become a nightmare of interview requests, book deal offers, and messages from strangers sharing their own marriage stories. But Sarah's name in the sender field stopped my heart mid-beat. Subject line: "We need to talk." My finger hovered over the message for a full minute before I opened it. "Joshua, I'm sure you know by now that I've seen what you wrote about us, about me. I need you to understand how difficult this has been, having our private life dissected by millions of strangers. We need to have a conversation. I'll be in town Thursday afternoon. I'm coming to the house at 2 p.m. whether you want to see me or not. Sarah. No, dear Joshua. No, love, Sarah. Just a demand disguised as a request, signed with the efficiency of someone who'd already moved on from caring about my comfort. I read the email 17 times, analyzing every word choice, every punctuation mark, searching for clues about her emotional state. Was she angry, hurt, embarrassed? The tone was so carefully neutral that it revealed nothing except her determination to confront me face to face. Thursday arrived gray and cold, the kind of January day that makes you question why anyone chooses to live where winter means 3 months of frozen misery. I spent the morning cleaning the house, not because it was dirty, but because I needed something to do with my hands while my mind raced through possible conversations. What did she want to say? Was she coming to ask me to stop sharing our story? To demand I take down the posts that had made our marriage public property? Or was this about something else entirely? At exactly 2 p.m., a car I didn't recognize pulled into our driveway. Our driveway. Old habits die hard, even after 3 months of living alone. Sarah got out of what looked like a rental car, and I watched her through the living room window like a spy in my own home. She was wearing a coat I'd never seen, cream-colored wool that made her look elegant and expensive. Her hair was different too, shorter and styled in a way that framed her face beautifully. She looked like a woman who'd been taking better care of herself, or maybe like a woman who had someone else taking care of her. She stood at the front door for a moment before knocking, and I wondered if she was remembering all the times she'd walked through that door without needing permission. Now she was a visitor in the house where she'd lived for 32 years. I opened the door, and we stared at each other like former acquaintances trying to remember how they knew each other. "Hello, Joshua." "Sarah." My voice came out rougher than I'd intended. "You look good." "Thank you." She stepped inside without waiting for an invitation, and I caught a scent I didn't recognize, a perfume that wasn't the vanilla body spray she'd worn for decades. Everything about her seemed different, upgraded, like she'd gotten a complete life makeover along with her new relationship. We stood in the hallway awkwardly, two people who'd shared a bed for over 3 decades now, unsure of basic social protocols. "Coffee?" I offered because it was easier than asking why she'd come. "Please." In the kitchen, I went through the motions of making coffee while Sarah sat at our table. Her table, really, since I'd just been borrowing it for the past few months. She looked around the room like she was visiting a museum of her former life, taking inventory of what had changed and what had stayed the same. "The house looks good," she said. "Clean." I've had time to learn basic housekeeping. "I saw the story, Joshua. All of it. The original posts, the interviews, the articles written about you. The whole internet knows the intimate details of our marriage now." I set her coffee down, black with 1 sugar, the way she'd always taken it, and sat across from her. "I didn't ask for any of that. Tyler posted it without my permission. But you haven't asked him to take it down. It's too late for that. Once something's on the internet, you could have refused the interviews. You could have declined to comment. You could have let it fade away instead of feeding the fire." She was right. After the initial shock, I'd started doing interviews, talking to reporters, expanding on the themes in my writing. Part of it was because people seemed genuinely helped by the story. But if I was being honest, part of it was also because I'd enjoyed the attention, the validation, the sense that my pain had purpose. "People have been helped by it," I said. "Marriage counselors are using it in their sessions. Couples are having conversations they never had before." At my expense. At our expense. I didn't spare myself in that writing, Sarah. I took full responsibility for... You took responsibility for your version of what went wrong, but you never asked for my version. The accusation hung between us, and I realized she was right again. Even in my most self-aware moments, I'd been telling only my side of the story. I'd examined my own failures exhaustively, but I'd never really considered that there might be aspects of our marriage's decline that I still didn't understand. "So, tell me your version." Sarah laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Now you want to know? After 32 years and a public autopsy of our marriage, now you're curious about my perspective." "I've always wanted to know. I just didn't know how to ask." "You didn't know how to ask your own wife how she was feeling." The question was fair and devastating. How do you explain to someone that you can live with a person for decades and somehow never learn the basic skill of emotional curiosity? I thought I knew how you were feeling. I thought if something was really wrong, you'd tell me directly. I did tell you, Joshua. Maybe not in words you recognized, but I told you in 100 different ways. Every time I suggested we try something new together and you said you weren't interested. Every time I shared something I was excited about and you responded with, "That's nice, honey," without looking up from your phone. Every time I tried to have a real conversation about something other than logistics and you changed the subject. Each example felt like a small slap of recognition. I thought I was being agreeable, going along with her interests when it was convenient. She'd experienced it as systematic dismissal. I tried to get your attention for years, she continued. I tried being direct, asking for more time together, more conversation, more connection. You'd agree in the moment and then nothing would change. So I tried being indirect, hoping you'd notice I was unhappy and ask what was wrong. But you seemed relieved that I was making fewer demands, not concerned that I was withdrawing. I thought you were content. You thought I was convenient. There's a difference. She was crying now, not the dramatic sobbing of movie scenes, but the quiet tears of someone who'd held in years of disappointment. Do you know what it's like to feel invisible in your own marriage? To feel like you could disappear, and the only thing your husband would notice is that dinner wasn't on the table. That's not. When's the last time you asked me about my dreams, Joshua? Not my plans for the day or my opinion about paint colors, but my actual dreams about what I wanted from life. I opened my mouth and closed it again. The silence stretched between us like an admission of guilt. Richard asked me that question on our second coffee date, Sarah said quietly. What did I dream about? What did I want that I wasn't getting? What would make me feel alive? No one had asked me those questions in so long that I started crying right there in the coffee shop. Coffee dates. Yes, coffee dates. Because I was lonely in my marriage and a man who barely knew me was showing more interest in my inner life than my husband had in years. Why didn't you just leave me then? Why the affair? Sarah was quiet for a long time, staring into her coffee cup like it might contain answers. Because I kept hoping you'd notice something was wrong and fight for us. I kept thinking that if you realized you were losing me, you'd remember how to see me again. The coffee dates with Richard started as friendship, but they became more because he made me feel like I existed as a person, not just as your wife. And now I'm in love with someone who thinks I'm fascinating, who asks about my opinions and remembers my answers, who wants to travel to places I've dreamed of seeing, who sees me as a whole person instead of just the woman who manages his household. The finality in her voice was unmistakable. I didn't come here to reconcile, Joshua. I came here to ask you to stop making our marriage a public spectacle. Find a different story to tell. She stood up, leaving her coffee barely touched. I'm glad you've learned to see yourself clearly, she said, walking toward the door. I just wish you'd learned to see me clearly when it mattered. After she left, I sat alone in the kitchen, surrounded by the echoes of 32 years of conversations I should have had but never did. And for the first time since this all began, I understood that some mistakes can't be fixed, only learned from. The call came on a Sunday evening in February, 2 weeks after Sarah's visit. I was sitting in my living room, working on what had become my 5th notebook, pages and pages of letters I'd never send, conversations I wished I'd had, apologies that came 32 years too late. The writing had become my obsession, the only way I could make sense of the wreckage of my life. When the phone rang, I almost didn't answer it. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize with what looked like an international prefix. Probably another reporter wanting to interview me about marriage and middle age and learning too late to pay attention to the person you love. But something made me pick up. Hello, Joshua. This is Richard Chen. The voice was exactly as I remembered from company parties. Smooth, professional, the kind of confident tone that probably served him well in boardrooms and apparently in stealing other men's wives. Richard. I kept my voice neutral, though my heart was doing that irregular dance again. "I wasn't expecting to hear from you." "I imagine not." There was a pause, the kind of silence that comes when someone's trying to figure out how to say something difficult. "I'm calling from Bora Bora. Sarah and I are, well, we're supposed to be on our honeymoon." "Supposed to be?" Present tense, but with hesitation. "Congratulations," I said, though the word felt like swallowing glass. "Joshua, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me." "About what?" "About Sarah, about your marriage, about everything you wrote in that story that's made you internet famous." I waited, saying nothing, letting him struggle with whatever he was trying to ask. "Was it all true? Everything you wrote about how you failed to see her, how you took her for granted, how you made her feel invisible?" "Every word." Another long pause. I could hear ocean waves in the background, the sound of the paradise that should have been the soundtrack to marital bliss. "Because Sarah talks about you constantly. Not with anger anymore, but with, I don't know how to describe it. Sadness? Regret? She reads your interviews, follows the response to your story, checks to see if you've written anything new. She told me to stop making our marriage public." "She says that, but she can't stop paying attention to what you're sharing. It's like she's watching you become the husband she always wanted you to be, except it's happening after she left you for me." The honesty in his admission caught me off guard. This wasn't what I'd expected from the man who'd swept my wife away to tropical paradise. "Why are you telling me this, Richard?" "Because I thought I was rescuing her from an emotionally absent husband. I thought I was offering her something you never could: attention, adventure, appreciation. But now I'm realizing that what she really wanted was for you to see her the way I see her. She didn't want to leave her marriage, Joshua. She wanted to save it. She wanted you to fight for it." The words hit me like another heart attack. Sarah hadn't wanted to escape our life together. She'd wanted me to wake up and start living it with her. "She talks about your writing," Richard continued. "She says it proves you were capable of seeing her clearly all along, that you just chose not to until it was too late. She reads passages out loud and cries, not because they're painful, but because they're beautiful, because they show a depth of understanding and appreciation she spent decades trying to get from you." I closed my eyes, imagining Sarah in some luxury resort, crying over my words while sitting next to the man she'd chosen to replace me. "Richard, why are you calling me? What do you want from me?" "I want to know if you meant what you wrote, about taking responsibility, about understanding your failures, about finally learning to see her as a whole person instead of just your wife." "Of course I meant it." "Then I need you to know something. Sarah isn't happy here. Not the way I thought she'd be. She's grateful. She's trying to be present. She's making an effort to build a new life with me. But she's not happy." "What do you mean?" "I mean she's grieving, Joshua. She's grieving the marriage she always wanted to have with you. She's grieving the version of you that emerged in your writing, the man who finally learned to pay attention, to be curious, to appreciate complexity and depth. She fell in love with that man through your notebooks, except that man only showed up after she was gone." I felt like I was drowning in irony. My attempts to understand my failures had inadvertently shown Sarah who I could have been all along. "She married you," I said. "She married me because she'd given up hope that you'd ever become the husband she needed. But now, reading about your transformation, she's wondering if she gave up too soon." "Are you asking me to—" "What? Try to win her back?" "No." Richard's voice was firm. "I'm asking you to let her go completely. To stop writing about her, stop doing interviews about your marriage, stop keeping her tethered to a relationship that's over." "I don't understand." "Sarah can't fully commit to our future together while she's watching you finally become the man she always knew you could be. Every interview you give, every new insight you share about marriage and emotional intimacy, every evidence of your growth and self-awareness, it's like watching what might have been if you'd done this work while you were still married to her." The cruel mathematics of the situation became clear. My public journey of self-discovery, which had helped thousands of other couples, was torturing the one person I'd most wanted to help. "She chose you," I said quietly. "She settled for me," Richard replied, his voice heavy with resignation. "And I was arrogant enough to think that would be enough, that being seen and appreciated by anyone would heal the wound of being invisible to you for so long. But it doesn't work that way. What are you asking me to do? Stop performing your growth for public consumption. Stop making your marriage the centerpiece of your story. Let her memory of you be the man who didn't pay attention, not the man who learned to pay attention too late. Give her permission to love me without constantly being reminded of who you might have become." The request was both reasonable and impossible. My writing had become my lifeline, the thing that gave meaning to my pain and purpose to my failure. But it was also keeping Sarah trapped between two versions of me, the husband who'd ignored her and the man who'd learned to see her clearly only after losing her. If I stop writing about us, stop doing interviews, stop sharing the story, she might be able to move on completely, and so might you. And if I don't, then she'll spend the rest of her life wondering what could have been, and I'll spend mine competing with a ghost, the ghost of who you became after she left. After he hung up, I sat in my empty house, surrounded by notebooks full of insights that had come too late to save my marriage, but just in time to ruin Sarah's ability to be happy without me. Richard was asking me to choose Sarah's happiness over my own healing, to sacrifice the public validation I'd found in sharing our story for her private peace of mind. It was the kind of selfless gesture I should have made decades earlier, when it might have saved our marriage instead of just salving my conscience. For the first time since this all began, I had to decide who I wanted to be. The man who'd learned to see clearly, or the man who'd learned to love completely. Sometimes those aren't the same person. The Today Show interview was scheduled for a Tuesday morning in March, 3 months after my story went viral. It was supposed to be the big one, the national platform that would cement my place as the poster child for husbands who learned to pay attention too late. My literary agent was thrilled. My publisher was salivating. Tyler kept texting me reminders about the exposure this would bring to the book deal we'd just signed. But all I could think about was Richard's phone call and Sarah's tears in some tropical paradise, grieving a marriage she'd tried to save while I was sleepwalking through it. I sat in the green room at 30 Rockefeller Plaza, watching other guests get their makeup touched up and their talking points rehearsed. A famous chef promoting his new cookbook, an actress discussing her charity work, a politician explaining his latest policy proposal. Everyone had something to sell, including me. "Mr. Patterson," a young producer with a headset and clipboard approached. "We're ready for you in makeup." I looked at myself in the green room mirror, a 61-year-old man who'd become accidentally famous for publicly dissecting his own failures. In the reflection, I could see the makeup artist waiting to make me camera ready, the lights being adjusted on the set where I'd sit across from a sympathetic host and explain to millions of viewers how a man could be married for 32 years without really knowing his wife. "Actually," I said, standing up, "I need to make a phone call first." The producer looked panicked. "Sir, we go live in 20 minutes. We really need to get you into makeup now. This will just take a minute." I stepped outside the green room and called the producer who'd booked me for the interview. "David, it's Joshua Patterson. I can't do the interview today." "What?" "Joshua, we're going live in 18 minutes. You're already here. What's wrong?" I can't keep doing this. I can't keep making my private life public entertainment." "Joshua, you signed a contract. We've promoted this interview all week. You have a book coming out. This is the biggest platform you'll ever have." "I understand, and I'm sorry, but I'm done talking about my marriage." I hung up and turned off my phone. Through the glass walls of the building, I could see the chaos I'd just caused. Producers running around, assistants making frantic calls, the host probably being told that her featured guest had just bailed with 15 minutes to spare. But all I felt was relief. I took the elevator down to street level and walked out into the March morning, breathing in the cold New York air like a man who'd just escaped drowning. For months, I'd been performing my pain for audiences who found it inspiring, or instructive, or entertaining. I'd become a character in my own story, the reformed husband who'd learned valuable lessons about love and attention and emotional intimacy. But somewhere along the way, I'd forgotten that the story wasn't really about me. It was about Sarah, and the damage I'd done by treating her like a supporting character in my own life instead of the protagonist of her own. The book deal would probably disappear. The literary agent would fire me. Tyler would be disappointed that his internet-famous grandfather had sabotaged his own success. But for the first time in months, I felt like I was making a choice based on love instead of ego. I took the train home to an empty house that felt different somehow, not like a museum of my failed marriage, but like a place where I could finally start figuring out how to live with the consequences of my choices. That evening, I called Tyler. "Grandpa Joe, what happened? The Today Show people called looking for you. They said you just walked out." "I did." "But why? This was your biggest opportunity. The book, the speaking engagements, all of it. Tyler, I need to ask you to do something for me." "What?" "I need you to take down the original posts, all of them, and I need you to help me contact everyone who shared the story and ask them to stop." "Grandpa Joe, you can't put this genie back in the bottle. It's too late. The story's everywhere now. I know I can't erase what's already out there, but I can stop feeding it. I can stop adding to it. I can stop making my ex-wife's private pain into public content." Tyler was quiet for a long moment. "This is about Grandma Sarah, isn't it?" "Yes." "Do you think she'll come back if you stop talking about her?" The question was so innocent, so hopeful, so completely missing the point that it broke my heart a little. "No, Tyler. She's married to someone else now. She's building a new life. But maybe if I stop performing my regrets in public, she can build that life without constantly being reminded of what we used to have and what we might have had if I'd been smarter sooner." "So you're giving up your success for her, even though she left you?" "I'm giving up my success because of her, because she deserves to be happy, and my public redemption arc is making that impossible." "That's either really romantic or really stupid." "Maybe both." Over the next week, I systematically dismantled the platform I'd accidentally built. I canceled the book deal, explaining to my bewildered publisher that I no longer wanted to monetize my marriage's failure. I declined speaking engagements at marriage retreats and relationship conferences. I stopped responding to interview requests and deleted my social media accounts. Tyler helped, though he clearly thought I was making a mistake that would cost me money and fame I'd never have the chance to reclaim. "You could have been the marriage guy," he said sadly, "like the expert people go to for relationship advice." "I was never qualified to be the marriage guy," I told him. "I was just a guy who'd failed at marriage and gotten lucky enough to figure out why." "But people were learning from your story. Marriages were being saved. And maybe they still will be, from what's already out there. But Sarah shouldn't have to sacrifice her privacy and peace of mind so other people can learn from my mistakes." The withdrawal from public attention was harder than I'd expected. For months, I'd been getting constant validation, messages from grateful readers, invitations to share my story, recognition for my insights about love and marriage. Going back to anonymity felt like losing a limb. But slowly, the attention faded. The story moved out of the viral spotlight and into the background noise of the internet. New scandals emerged. New inspirational stories captured public imagination. New experts stepped forward to explain relationships to audiences hungry for simple answers to complex problems. And somewhere in the Pacific, Sarah was hopefully learning to be happy without constantly being reminded of the man I'd become too late to save our marriage. I kept writing, but only for myself now. Private journals filled with observations about solitude, aging, learning to live with regret without letting it consume you, the difference between accountability and performance. The way love sometimes means letting go completely, even of the chance to be forgiven. It was the hardest thing I'd ever written, and no one would ever read it, which was exactly the point. The invitation arrived on a Thursday in late April, 6 weeks after I'd walked away from my 15 minutes of fame. Cream-colored cardstock, elegant script, the kind of formal wedding invitation that costs more than most people spend on groceries in a month. Sarah Eleanor Patterson and Richard James Chen request the honor of your presence at their wedding ceremony. I read it 3 times before the words fully registered. They were getting married again, or rather getting married properly this time, with family and friends and all the traditional ceremony that their quick courthouse wedding in Bora Bora hadn't included. At the bottom, in Sarah's careful handwriting, Joshua, I know this seems strange, but you're part of my story. I need you to see me happy. I hope you'll come. S. Part of her story. After everything we'd been through, after the divorce and the public dissection of our marriage and my voluntary disappearance from the spotlight, she still considered me part of her narrative. I stared at that invitation for 3 days, trying to understand what she was really asking. Did she want closure, forgiveness, proof that I could be happy for her? Or was this some kind of test, a way to see if I'd truly learned to put her happiness before my own ego? On Sunday morning, I called the number on the RSVP card. Chen Residence. Richard's voice, cheerful and relaxed in a way that suggested domestic contentment. Richard, it's Joshua. I got the wedding invitation. Joshua? His tone shifted, became more careful. I'm glad you called. Sarah wasn't sure you'd respond at all. Why did you invite me? Because Sarah asked me to. Because she said our marriage couldn't truly begin until our past was properly honored and released. And you agreed to this? I love her enough to want her completely free from whatever's been holding her back. If that means having her ex-husband at our wedding, then that's what we'll do. The generosity in his statement was staggering. Either Richard Chen was a saint, or he was more secure in Sarah's love than I'd ever been during 32 years of marriage. Will I be the only ex-husband at the wedding? Yes, but you won't be the only one there who cares about Sarah's happiness more than their own comfort. I told him I'd be there. The ceremony was held in the Botanical Gardens where Sarah and I had taken our engagement photos 33 years earlier. The irony wasn't lost on me, watching my ex-wife marry another man in the same place where we'd once promised to love each other forever. I arrived early and sat in the back row, wearing the navy suit Sarah had always said brought out my eyes. A few people recognized me. Neighbors, mutual friends who'd followed my story online before I disappeared from public view. They nodded politely but kept their distance, unsure how to navigate the social complexity of my presence. When Sarah walked down the aisle, my breath caught in my throat. She wore a simple ivory dress that made her look radiant and timeless. Her hair was styled the way she'd worn it on our wedding day, and for a moment, I was 28 years old again, watching the most beautiful woman I'd ever seen promise to love me forever. But she wasn't looking at me. She was looking at Richard with the kind of joy and anticipation I remembered from our early years together, before life got complicated and I got complacent, and we both got lost in the routine of being married without remembering why we'd wanted to be married in the first place. During the ceremony, I found myself really watching Sarah, not with the analytical eye of a man trying to understand what went wrong, but with the appreciative gaze of someone who genuinely wanted to see her happy. She glowed. She laughed at Richard's vows. She cried during her own. She looked like a woman who'd found exactly what she'd been searching for, and I felt something I hadn't expected, genuine happiness for her. After the ceremony, during the reception, I approached the newlyweds during a quiet moment. Sarah saw me coming and her face went through several emotions: surprise, nervousness, something that might have been hope. "Joshua," she said softly, "you came. You asked me to. I wasn't sure you would." I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out a leather-bound journal. Not one of the notebooks I'd filled with analysis of our marriage, but something new. Clean pages, unmarked by past mistakes or public confessions. "I brought you a wedding gift," I said, offering it to Richard. He looked confused. For me? For both of you. It's empty now, but I wanted to give you something to write your own story in. Not the story of what went wrong in my marriage to Sarah, but the story of what goes right in yours. Sarah was crying now, quiet tears that she wiped away with the back of her hand. There's something else, I continued. I want you both to know that I've stopped writing about us publicly. No more interviews, no more articles, no more books about marriage and mistakes and learning to pay attention too late. That chapter of my life is closed. Joshua. Sarah started to say something, but I held up my hand. Let me finish. I spent 32 years not really seeing you, not appreciating who you were beyond what you did for our family. I don't want to spend whatever time I have left making that same mistake in reverse, turning you into a symbol for my own growth instead of letting you be a real person living your own life. I turned to Richard. Take care of her dreams, not just her daily needs. Ask her what she's thinking about, what she's hoping for, what she's curious about. Travel with her to all those places she's wanted to see. And remember that loving her means staying interested in who she's becoming, not just grateful for who she's been. Richard nodded, understanding the weight of what I was saying. I forgive you, Sarah whispered, for all of it. I forgive you, and I hope someday you can forgive yourself. I'm working on it, I said, but forgiveness isn't why I'm here. I'm here because you asked me to see you happy, and I needed to see you happy. Really see you, without trying to make it about me, or my growth, or my story. I kissed her cheek, shook Richard's hand, and walked away from the reception, leaving them to celebrate their future without the ghost of my past casting shadows over their joy. Driving home alone, I felt something I hadn't experienced in over a year. Peace. Not the kind that comes from being forgiven or validated or understood, but the kind that comes from finally learning to love someone completely enough to let them go. The empty house didn't feel like a punishment anymore. It felt like possibility, a space where I could figure out how to be happy without needing someone else to complete me, how to be interesting without performing my pain for an audience, how to love without possessing. I had notebooks to fill with new stories, not about Sarah or our marriage or my spectacular failures in understanding love, but about a man learning to live fully in his own life instead of mourning the life he'd lost through his own blindness. For the first time in 33 years, I was genuinely curious about what I might discover about myself. Whew, folks, that's the end of my journey with Sarah. Peace at last, but what a ride. Tell me in the comments, would you have attended the wedding like I did, or walked away forever? Thanks for listening. If it touched you, like and subscribe for more, hit the bell. The next tale's even more heart-wrenching. Watch it now.